California has the process of a civil grand jury looking at programs, government programs, and making recommendations. And so our most recent grand jury report really noted that the library needs a strategic plan, hadn't had one for a very long time, and that it was critically important. So that sets the stage for a pretty high level of need for a plan. So then now I'll tell you a little bit about, so before I was the director here in Marin County, I spent 25 years in Nevada at 2 public libraries, and also for 7 years as the Nevada State Librarian. So I have a pretty significant experience in strategic planning, both at like a library systems approach and then the statewide approach. Many of you're probably kind of aware of what happens at the state library. You need to create a strategic plan or a plan so that when you get the Library Services and Technology Act money, you have a 5-year plan that tells the federal government how you're going to use that money and how you're going to move library services forward in your state. So I've hired consultants. I've done virtually every flavor and version that's possible, and everyone to date before this planning process really was pretty traditional needs assessment, create a pretty huge binder and then maybe a glossy plan, and have many of them were quite good, but they weren't alive. They generally were, here's where you are in time, and then maybe 2 or 3 years you'd check up again and see where you were in the process. So the difference that I see with this process that we used OrangeBoy for help with is not only did they do all the traditional kind of activities of needs assessment, and you'll hear later today on a whole new level of data points that are not so usual for us to have to make good decisions, but the part that I think is the most exciting for us is we're in this every day together, moving our strategic goals forward. So one of the, I think the slide now is showing our strategic plan, which is really, this is the forward-facing plan. The staff are all very aware of this. They have what looks like a Venn diagram with these 3 goals. We put our we do all of our reports to our body, our library commission. It guides every part of our process is what I'm trying to say, so including people's performance evaluation. So we really are, these are the 3 goals we are really trying to move the needle on. And they are, as you can see on the screen, our goal number 1 is really about early literacy and making sure that we are the place where it's recognized in the community that we provide preschool readiness and support for making children love reading and become readers and therefore become successful students and successful citizens. Goal 2 is when you get the kids a little bit older, our support as what sometimes people call, the 3rd place. So out of school, the place where children start making decisions about their ability to, sorry about that, I think a phone coming in. So where students start making their ability to make decisions about their lifelong learning path and the things they're most passionate and interested in. So we're very much into looking at helping students become better learners and become self-directed learners. And then the 3rd goal is being the positive environment for digital literacy. So we're really promoting the activities that we have with ebooks, with our computers, with our ability to take some significant strides in the way that we are dealing with helping people become more digitally literate. And then, of course, also really enhancing our efforts with knowing that the data showed us how many people have smartphones, so we're really enhancing our ways about the way we communicate with people and the way that we deliver resources. So this is a 3-year strategic plan. We are pretty close to the beginning of our 2nd year, and we are making significant progress. And as I said, it's such an active an active endeavor with a partner where data is actually, real time and gives you guidance and lets you make course corrections and work in a way that, as I said before, I've really never done in a strategic planning process. And to date, we are having, very tremendous success with both this from the staff perspective, from our community's perspective, and just working, moving the library forward in a way that I can very precisely and accurately, and I think persuasively, show our impact. So I think that that's the foundation that I wanted to set, and I'm going to, I believe we're turning it back to Nickie, and she's going to dig a little deeper into what data gathering and what that all means, the customer intelligence part.
Great. Thank you, Sara. Can you all still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine, Nickie.
Yes, Nickie,
okay, great. I just wanted to make
we can
sure
hear well.
Okay, great. So, as Sara said, we here at OrangeBoy kind of take a very customer-centric approach to how we look at planning, and with that, really looking at ways that we can help organizations understand their customers in the context of the environments in which they work. And libraries traditionally have been, really great about attracting customers and really getting hands in the cards in the hands of their customers. But one of the advantages to really kind of taking more of a customer, using customer intelligence and taking a customer-centric approach is the ability to really move customers and engage customers throughout the entire life cycle that they have with the library. So really looking at ways to grow and retain those relationships with customers as they move through the organization. So as Sara said, we did a variety of different ways to collect information and feedback directly from customers, and as well as did some other more traditional applications of doing outreach and things throughout the strategic planning process. But the application that we typically use is what we call customer intelligence. And Matt, if you can get to the next slide, forward to the next slide, please. What customer intelligence is, essentially what you're looking at here on the screen is a dashboard of our products that we call Savannah. And Savannah is a data integration tool that brings together disparate customer information resources and your organizational resources into a single platform, and provides ways to look at that information in a really meaningful way. Not only is it used throughout the strategic planning process, like we worked with Marin County Free Library to kind of inform some of the goals and really use some of the data and information on the dashboard to help make those decisions, but really look at ways that we can expand relationships with customers by using some of the insights that we gathered from both data collection through surveys as well as information from the data from customers themselves. So we're going to take a closer look at some of the data and information that we looked at as part of this planning process. More specifically, some very specific metrics that are related to the customers and some of the ways that the library currently serves its customers and how the library is using that data and information as an ongoing way to evaluate its plan. Matt, if you could get to the next slide. So the first one we're going to look at here are what we call the first three. We're going to take a closer look at what we call the golden metrics, or the three golden metrics. These are market penetration, which is what's on the screen, our gain-loss ratio, and the occasional size, or the size of our occasional cluster. And we're going to talk about the other two in just a minute. But together combined, these three metrics really are an indicator of the library's health and its relationships with its customers. So the first one that we're looking at here, I'll just explain it, market penetration, is looking at what percentage of households the library serves within its service area, or what percentage of households have an active card. This is a measure really of the library's reach within the service area, and really its connection to the community. So in this case, Marin County Free Library serves 43%, and this is the most recent statistics for Q3 this year. We're looking at ways that we can really use this information to help the library benchmark against other libraries in the Savannah community. So the number you see below that is what we call the Savannah Community Benchmark, which again provides information or context to some of these numbers that are in Savannah to really inform you of ways that you can look at your data and think about how you're performing against other libraries that are also using Savannah as a dashboard tool to really measure their progress throughout the planning effort. So what we know is that Marin serves about 43% of households. Again, this is above what we've seen with some other libraries in the Savannah community, with the benchmark being 37%. The next thing we look at is the what we call the gain-loss ratio. And what this is looking at the number of new cardholders essentially divided by the number of cardholders who become inactive within a one-year period. Now, this metric helps indicate the extent of which our new cardholders are helping balance out the loss of our inactive customers. So a higher gain-loss ratio is actually better. So the closer you are to 1 indicates that you have more cardholders, new cardholders coming in, or you're acquiring new customers, more customers than you're actually losing to inactivity. So again, as we're thinking about ways that we're implementing the strategic plan, as Marin is evaluating its progress towards its goals, looking at indicators like this, like the gain-loss ratio, like the household market penetration, to really help gauge what progress it's making within its community and with its customers, how well it's serving its customers, how well it is moving toward those goals of really serving youth in their community, as well as some specific clusters that we'll talk about here in a little bit. The last one of the metrics that I want to, of the 3 golden metrics that I want to talk about, is the percent size of the occasionals. Now, an occasional is one of the 11 clusters that is embedded in Savannah. So Savannah brings together that organizational and customer data and automatically will segment your customers into one of 11 different user segments. And those user segments are specific to library use. So depending on how someone uses the library, the frequency of that behavior, an individual will be placed into a segment, and then that information is helped to use to target not only decisions, but also some of the various interactive tools for marketing purposes in the platform. So what this tells us is really the continuity of library usage within the library. A smaller percentage of occasionals is really what is to be desired here. Occasionals really indicate what percent of your customers are really have kind of one foot out the door, so to speak. Occasionals, specifically as the name indicates, tell us that these are occasional type users, and the next steps they're going to be making potentially, if we don't get to them, if we don't engage them, is they become an inactive user of the library. So they become a pretty big strategic play. And if you look at, if you take in consideration really the size of the occasional cluster in relationship to the retention ratio, this can really tell you how well you're doing with customer engagement. So for example, if you have both a low percent of occasionals and a higher retention ratio, meaning you have lost fewer customers to inactivity, this indicates that you have successfully engaged your customers and that you're heading in the right direction. So again, these are there for evaluative purposes. And again, we provide benchmarks for these metrics so that you can get a sense of really where you are in comparison to other libraries as you're making progress towards those goals. So those are kind of the three areas that we really kind of think about when we're moving through a strategic planning process and thinking about how can we, what activities can we do as an organization, or can the library do as an organization to really move these needles and really move them in a positive direction, and think about ways that we can build strategies, goals, and activities that are really going to engage our customers so that they become lifelong users of the library. We know that lifelong usage is a very important thing. One of the things, as you'll see on the next slide, is that childhood library use is something that we see, generally speaking, that most library patrons who use the library today, generally speaking, have used the library when they were a child. And what you're seeing is some survey results of self-reported data from Marin County Free Library indicating this exact finding. So less than 10% of the customers that are using the library today at Marin County Free Library use the library less than once a year when they were a child. So looking at things like customer retention and thinking about ways we can strategize about maintaining that relationship from a youth to teen through adulthood and beyond is really an important thing to consider as we're as you're moving through this process, thinking about your goals. And that kind of ties back to, as Sara was saying, goals 1 and 2, being really youth-focused, thinking about how we can help our youth and our community become successful, but also bringing that through and finding ways that we can deliver other services that our customers have told us that they wanted, and wrapping our goals really around all of that information. So you'll see on the next slide some of the things we use, and this relates specifically to Goal 3 in Sara's plan, is thinking about ways we can connect to customers who are on the move and looking at new ways that we can reach out to them that are convenient. And we know that Sara's customers have high mobile adoption. We asked about specific use of mobile devices, what types of devices the customers are using, so we can find new ways that we can connect with them, and we can really have an omnipresence with our customers. This information and some of the other information that you'll see on the next slide, also collected directly from the customers, was really what did our customers tell us that they wanted, and Sara's using this information use it as part of the development of the strategic plan, but is also using it daily to make her decisions moving the organization forward. So we also learned things about really things that were related to convenience and wanting more. Customers always want more of what they can get their hands on, materials specifically, and those services, and they want them in a very convenient manner, typically through the mobile device as they all have. So we use this information as well as the customer clusters, which I talked a little bit about already. But again, just as a little bit of a refresher here, the clusters play a pretty significant role in really helping, again, understand ways that we can engage individual customers. Not every customer is the same, and the things that each individual customer needs are pretty unique to how they're accessing your specific services at the library. So clusters help you really define how your customers are using you, how customers are accessing different types of materials or services based off of the information they leave in their consumption behavior. So we look at those patterns in the data, and develop out profiles that are based off of that information, both self-reported data as well as the patterns of data that are collected through Savannah. Now, this is an example here of Marin County's cluster and their cluster distribution. So as I said, there's different size segments for every library is a little different. The names are the same, but the makeup of those and the size of those clusters are a little bit different depending on your library and what you're doing as an organization. What this can help you do, again, as a tool, can not only help you inform the decisions that you make by understanding the types of customers that are accessing services, but can also help you measure. So if we do X, Y, Z, will this move these customers into a different type of behavior? Or can we take and make shifts in what we're delivering as services to see if we can, re-engage our occasional clusters, for example.
Nickie, if it's okay, I'd go ahead and add something.
Sure.
So just for the folks on the call and to give you some real life use of these clusters and this kind of designation, I'm going to tell you a couple of things that helped us with decisions. So in this budget cycle that we're in right now, you can see our double features is one of our smaller clusters at 3%. So that basically is just what you'd expect it would be. It's the regular users who almost are using a lot of taking out of our DVD movies. And what's interesting is that I think that, like all of you, I'm sure you're starting to rethink what this is going to look like with downloadable movies and just the trending away from people using the DVD format. So knowing that that's the level of customer, the level of customers that we're dealing with, we did make a strategic decision that we would buy less of DVDs across the whole organization. Now, we do know that that'll have, and I'm sure every one of you will understand that it will affect some circulation numbers. And I think in years past we might have made the decision not to do that because we'd have been so driven by a circulation number that we didn't want to report, a downtrend in that. But because we have so much better data here, I think we all felt pretty comfortable about reducing the physical format of buying DVDs, and that money was moved over to digital content so that we could, when you saw on the slide before, we could increase our ebook collection. We could really look at things that were convenient and easy for patrons to use. So that's a real-life example of having, not just using your gut-level data, but having real data to make decisions.
Great. Yeah, I think those are a good example, and I've seen other applications of the cluster distribution can also be broken down by branch location, so how to deliver services differently, even at the branch level, can be very helpful. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So the other thing to kind of consider too is when you plot your customers and the different behaviors, there's a way to kind of demonstrate the relationship that each customer cluster has with the library, and that's really based off of the different number of services that a customer is accessing based off of that specific behavior, but also to the frequency of which that behavior is occurring. So the more somebody does something with the organization, or the more a customer accesses or consumes that service with the library, the greater the relationship. So really you can use this information for building out very specific types of strategies as they relate to the goals, so you can strengthen those relationships. We want more touch points with our customers. At the end of the day, we really want to make those touch points that we have really great, so that they will come back for more. They will continue to stay and maintain that relationship with the library. And that's exactly what Marin has done with their strategic plan. As you'll see on the next slide, there's specific types of strategies that group with specific clusters that they're working through, and that's specific to decisions, as Sara was saying, to what they're doing today in terms of what services they're purchasing, to really even marketing and how they're marketing the library services. So I'm going to let Sara tell you a little bit about some of the things that she's doing and some of the results that she's had taking this information and using this information as part of the implementation of her plan. Sara, I'm going to turn that back over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So one of the things that when I talked to you at the beginning of our conversation today was our interest in, a youth-focused interest and being able to serve youth of all ages and parents to support lifelong learning and literacy and student achievement. So one of the things that became pretty apparent to us was that, we had some barriers that really prevent the kind of usage that we were trying to promote. And one of those barriers were fines on children's materials. So we knew that, that the fines were a barrier where people would get to the point where they, their card wouldn't work anymore because they owed fines on the materials, and they would just really quit using, and might quit using, just because they couldn't afford it, and then compounded with, then they, might not be happy with us too. And as anybody in marketing knows that, turning the customer around from unhappy to happy is a difficult job to do. So we went to our Board of Supervisors and asked to not have youth fines anymore, which I know is across the country. There's a lot of places that do that. It was a really positive thing. And then the second part of the that we did, which I think was a much bigger step and one that is much harder to do, but we were successful with it, is we have an effort underway to provide every student in our jurisdiction a library card. And the barrier that we found to that was that people would have, the students would have materials and fines, both materials they never return and fines that had accumulated on those cards. And so we'd make this effort to get every child a card, and then we'd run into the fact that there would be a fine. And unfortunately in our system, we do move people eventually to collections. So, it's a huge double whammy. Not only are we stopping them as patrons and, hurting them in their endeavors to become lifelong learners and great students, but we also might be affecting, the family's, personal viability. So what we were able to do with our Board of Supervisors is ask that we could have the ability to give everyone a fresh start, or a clean slate, I believe is what we called it. So when we go in and get cards for every student, if they have a fine, even if it's an overdue material that's, decades old or weeks old, we can just remove it. And so we've been able to use this to get library cards in hands. The hard part about this for us is Marin County, we have 19 school districts, so it's a negotiation with each and every one of them, but we have 4 on board and 2 school districts we've completed where we're going into the classroom and handing out a card to every single student. So those do 2 things. One, it reduces the barriers, and then 2, it also is going to increase our strategic goals of helping, especially goal number 2, where we're helping that student become a lifelong learner. And what we were able to do with the Savannah project is send that information out to our entire customer base to give them, to tell them the whys and to give them the reasons that we were making this action and what our outcomes were. And I think what's really interesting here is this is about, it'll be a year ago, and I think it was at March. So when we did this, the normal public ways that we talk to our customers for us, which is press releases, on our web page and maybe on social media, we actually had kind of some pushback about that, and we had a few people not too happy with this decision, thinking that somehow we were reducing kids' ability to be responsible. But then what was interesting is when we used Savannah to send it to our customer base, it was a completely different response, and we touched way more people, but we touched exactly the right people, and they were overwhelmingly supportive of what we have done here. So I think there's one of the most powerful things about that is being able to have a real conversation with your actual customers versus a media conversation, which can often get convoluted by some people that derail you. So I think it's really, I think that's something to think about as you have a tool to really get very specific with your customers and communicate with them very directly. The other thing that I think we'll probably talk about a little bit more is we were concerned, as I'm sure many of you are, is that our library patrons and customers would get tired of us and not want us to send them all these emails. That's simply not true. They're very interested in our communication and in the ways that we're talking with them. So I think that that's a good example of this being a live and active participation as a strategic plan with our community. So I think I turn it back to you, Nickie.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I think that as Sara was saying, the data that she's using, what's really important to kind of think about is that the data is live, so it is actionable, and you can continue to use this information on an ongoing basis. That previous slide that was showing the risk index by branch specifically, Sara, you talked a little bit about how you were going out to community schools and putting cards in the hands of youth. And really this particular data point helps kind of direct some of that. I think you started in the Fairfax branch first. Is that correct? And
that's correct.
You're working your way around in the community. But this specifically, just a quick explanation of what risk index is. It's a community indicator that takes into consideration 3 demographic variables, and this is based off of market data, not customer data, but it's female head of household, poverty level, and English as a second language. And what that does then, it takes that information and it gives you an index of where you have the highest risk for youth not passing reading proficiency tests. And that's where it can help you guide some of your efforts as you're going to do specific things related to youth outreach, as Sara has indicated in her strategic plan, can help her kind of direct what facilities that would be the most useful to have and which communities have the greater need for that service. And as Sara was saying on the next slide, you can see the communication specifically about how she targeted the communication to inform really how she was doing, how she was launching her strategic plan and talking about specifically getting cards in the hands of youth in her community. The next slide just kind of talks a little bit about some of those immediate results and what happened when Sara changed, when Sara launched this the cards and changed her policy. She did get a good response. We were able to, on the back end, then measure specifically the engagement of a customer cluster we call the Rising Stars. And this is a youth-focused cluster that's young children who are using the library independent of a parent. So coming in and have their own library card. So you'll see here on the screen, again, for using and tracking this information ongoing, Sara was able to tell that in April, when the policy change happened and occurred, you'll see that there was an uptick in May in the use of Rising Stars, and that continued out through June, July, August, and September.
And
so
Nickie, if I can add a little bit more to this, as I was saying about being able to communicate directly with our customers, and especially when you have, you invariably have some policies that have a little bit of, some people who will feel that maybe what you're doing isn't exactly right. But what I think is, I just want to underline again what I mentioned before is one of the things that we really found with being able to target our activities and then communicate with our actual customers about those activities that, as I said, the vast, we really didn't, when we were talking with our library users that were in the right space, like the people with children, they were extremely supportive. And then when I had the few calls and some kind of, people unhappy with it, they were generally, when I'd ask, well, do you have children? Well, no, I haven't had children in my household for 40 years. I just think what you're doing is wrong. So it really does help you calibrate those policy decisions in a way that makes sure that you're touching the right people in the right way.
Right. So it confirms both that you've, reached the customers and told them about it, but also confirms the direction that you're headed.
Right. The point I'm really trying to make about this, with the right data, because sometimes you can get really carried away with the an angry letter to the editor, but that's just one person. So when you can look at a broad level of data at different points, then it really helps you get perspective.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that what the next slide shows specifically is some of those results. So we're getting feedback, but we also have real data that can show that we did, did we actually do what we said we wanted to do, and that was re-engage our youth. And so to date, Sara has over 1,600 youth that she's re-engaged throughout some of these services that she's deployed, the policy change, and really getting youth cards in the community. You've also worked a little bit on restructuring some hours in some of your facilities. The next few slides show, Sara, really how you communicated that, and then some of the utilization changes that occurred with customers accessing different facilities.
So if you all remember earlier in the presentation when we talked to our customers, remember they wanted hours that served them better, and we were able to pass a parcel tax with the intention to expand services and promote services. And so once we were able to do that, specifically in some of our smaller libraries, they're small communities with a small library that one person is running that library. So we, before having resources, what we did is we closed the library down so that the librarian could go have a lunch break. So we were able to put resources in and keep the library open without doing that closure. So that was a great effort to do what the customers asked us to do. And then what was wonderful about Savannah and our relationship is then we were able to actually give this information out to the right customers in the right way, so that they were aware of it. And then once we did those activities, I think that if you move, I think the next slide kind of shows that we could actually see see some outcomes very specifically in regards to those efforts. So I think if we move into the utilization behavior, the next slide, that shows that direct correlation of the action that we took based on data from the strategic plan, and then how our action had a positive result. Okay, I think we can, if you go ahead and go to this. So this is yet another example of using a very specific way to communicate with our library customers. And we did this during National Friends of the Library Week, which I'm sure, virtually everyone in this audience has probably does something about that. Lots of traditional things where you're trying to show the great connection between the friends and your services. So we used this email that we sent out to our, again, to our broad-based community of users, and said, this is what the Friends do. The picture shows, for summer reading this year, we had kids could actually get prizes, but they also could, instead of getting prizes, they could give what those prizes were worth to to gain support for foster children. So the kids, instead of taking prizes, put their efforts towards that, and we were able to give a check to the people who support foster children in our community. So that was a really great example of showing, the wonderful collaboration. And then the big point about this is we were able to touch everyone in that week and say, hey, it's National Friends of the Library Week. Our friends do wonderful things. And then what our Friends of the Library does have a website, but they do not have a way to do online membership. So this drove people to the Friends of the Library website, and they needed to download a application and fill it out and then send in money. And we had 25 net result memberships of that, which is actually a pretty good number for us because those were results to joining our county-wide friends, and each of our branch libraries have Friends of the Library too. So people tend to want to support their branch library, but this broader support get people to join the county friends. So as you can see, those numbers, it was a pretty good open rate, and we had really a very good net, real response from that. And then very few people said, gee, I don't want to hear from you anymore, so the unsubscribe was 1% or less. And then you're seeing this another great way where we can communicate with people is that this one gives us the ability to reach out to people. So when they get a new library card, we can say hello and we're happy to have you, and here's a give them any kinds of we do try to change this up, but we're, as once someone gets that physical card, we want to make sure that they turn into a regular user. And like everywhere else in the world, it's so important to touch them and to be able to, whenever you go and do anything in the store and sign up, you hear immediately from them. And again, you can see here we don't, people are not finding that to be something they're not happy with. No unsubscribes, and that many people opening that.
Mm-hmm. Right, and you'll see also too there's the percent shows on that were opened on a mobile device. So again, we're seeing, and you'll see this kind of continually as we kind of review these emails, that Sara's customers are high mobile adopters.
Right,
so
and one of the things that we're using the data to help this data drive us is that we're very close. In the new year, we will be actually deploying an entirely online card that's full service. So they will be able to apply for a card online and get it and have all of our resources available and not have to come into the library ever. We've had online cards before where people had to touch, they had to actually physically come in at some point. And we know, we can see from our data that we know we have, we live in the Bay Area and very close to Silicon Valley. So we have people who could very well be perfectly happy with never needing to walk in the door and be real high use customers for us. So that, again, data driving decisions, and sometimes those things are hard. It's not been easy to find the ability to do an entirely online card, but it drove us to working hard to make that happen for us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think these next few kind of show a little bit more about just a couple of other things that you guys are working on with reconnecting with customers, specifically customers who you're at risk for potentially losing to an occasional or an activity we talked about earlier in the presentation. So this is just another example of a piece of communication that is looking to reengage. This case was a sliver of our bedtime stories who had not used their card in 60 days. So the goal of this was really to try to bring them back in and use the library. So the real beauty of all the data being integrated into Savannah is we can actually look at those folks who got the message, opened the message, and then as you'll see on the next slide, that actually what their behavior was after the message. So did they re-engage with the library? What did they actually do? Did they change their behavior? And what that engagement looked like. Similar example is on the next one, and that went to a much broader audience, which is the inactive customers, and basically just sending a simple message that says, you know, we miss you, where have you been, and trying to get their attention. And so with this type of customer, you know, we're always surprised to see if we can get, you know, any customers to come back. If it's somebody who hasn't used the library in a year or more, it's obviously a little bit more challenging. But we did see that there were some customers who did come back and use the library after they got the message. So of those who opened it, a majority of them still stayed inactive, but we did get a little over 200 folks that did come back in and use the library. So I think that says a lot about the power of a message. And it was a simple, just an email that said, hey, you know, come back and see us. So, you know, communication is an important component and an important piece for re-engaging, as well as, you know, aligning those services and expectations of those customers for re-engagement purposes. So, Sara, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's next, and we can
yeah, I will, and I'm going to keep this pretty brief because I think I mentioned a lot of these things along the way, and I think we want to be able to have some time for questions for people. So for our early literacy goals, we're working on our, one of the things that we're really working on there is on our spaces, and we also in really trying to get the word out to folks about how important early literacy activities are. So not just the parents, you know, a real targeted approach of trying to reach some parents that don't necessarily think of the library as the place that they really need to be bringing their kids to. Goal number 2, I mentioned we're really working. That's where this library card initiative is critical, and we're working. It's a big endeavor, and we're working very hard to find the way to get the library card in every kid's hand. We're a partner with the Connect Ed, the initiative that the President Obama and the Institute of Museums and Library Services are nationwide to make this happen. In Goal 3, as I mentioned, we're looking for an entirely online library card. We realigned resources to make Wi-Fi better and stronger in every one of our locations, and we're working very hard to get on a California internet backbone that will provide much better broadband access to us at all of our locations. So, like the decisions that the data that we get that is driving our decisions, and what it does, I think that's really important is sometimes fun, exciting things come along to us, and if they're not fitting our goals, we pass on them, and that's hard to do, but it's really important if you're going to move the needle in specific ways. So I think that's the high level of what we're doing, and as I said, this has been not a library vendor relationship. It's really been a partnership, and we're very happy with where we are and where we're looking to go in the next few years. So with that, I guess we're hoping we have some questions, and we'd be happy to answer them.
Well, thank you, Nickie and Sara. It looks like we do have a couple of questions here. So one question we had was, what is the unknown cluster? And I think I can answer that. The unknown cluster means that they have done something within the library to update their last activity date, but it's not something that is currently being tracked in Savannah. So maybe it's something as logging into your account and paying a fine, or going and placing a hold on something, but you just haven't gone to pick it up yet. So something that impacts and updates the last activity date, but we do not know what that particular activity is. And then we had another question. I believe this was regarding to the increased number of rising stars. So the question is, did summer reading also contribute to the increase in June, July, and August? And can you separate that increase from the effect of the policy decisions?
Actually, yeah, we can. Fairfax was the library that we mentioned that we did cards, and we did those a little before summer reading. So we, I think we have some data that had a separate impact, but everything does get interrelated. I believe we are understanding that by getting the cards to that community for that particular library increase their summer reading use. Then I think the other thing that is we just got noticed, and I hadn't told Nickie this, so she'll be excited about it, is there was a challenge in California for increasing your summer reading usage, and we were one of the top 4 libraries in the country, or in California, wow, for our levels of increase in summer reading. So I think, like I said, it's hard to completely isolate things, and I think nor do we, are we sure we want to do that. The other thing that we are doing with library cards is as we do these throughout the county and the different districts, we're putting a code in, the school code, so we will be able in the future to, the OrangeBoy will be able to look at that data too, and we'll be able to get much granular about effects that we're having on a local level from the library card penetration.
Mm-hmm. Congratulations, Sara.
Yeah, we're running iPads. I think our increase was it's some ridiculously high number, like 189%. So we'll get that, because I should have mentioned that, because it might have been good in the slideshow, but we just found out like a week or so ago. So
great.
Well, excellent.
Okay, we have another question here. It says, are the benchmarks based on the library size or similar type of library, or just the database of users?
I'll take that. Right now, the benchmarks that are provided for the Savannah data are specific to aggregate data from all Savannah libraries. So it's not based on a specific library size, because we serve, there's a variety of different size libraries that are using Savannah. That being said, one of the metrics, actually, the retention ratio specifically, kind of takes in consideration the different size of customer base. So being that it's given in a ratio provides a little bit more comparative to take in consideration that there are different size libraries that are using Savannah. So a ratio is a good way to kind of look at it, taking into consideration that there are different sizes and different size patron files and things like that are stored in the product. So it does take that into consideration. But currently, we don't have the benchmarks broken out by size. It's an aggregate number. So.
It looks like we have another question that came through. This is regarding the risk index by branch. Can you share what data was used for this and describe what the risk index shows exactly? Looks like it was... Yes,
the risk index data that is an input into that algorithm is market data. So specifically looks at the percentage of female-headed households, the poverty level, so what percentage of your market is below the poverty line, and then the percentage of households with English as a second language. And so there's a kind of proprietary methodology that we put together here that takes those three into consideration and then provides a number between 0 and 100 that provides an indicator of whether or not a child would pass not a child, but the community, the community itself, if there's children in that community that are at risk for not passing reading proficiency tests. So the closer you are to 100, the greater the level of risk based off of those indicators. And this is a metric that has been tested in a variety of different markets, so it tends to hold true even in a diverse market like California, that there's generally a large population that has English as a second language. So.
It looks like we have one more question. How do you get customers permission to email them? Do you tell them you will send them marketing emails?
Well, I can actually, what we did is we, I think Nickie, you can help with this, but in the survey process,
Sure.
I believe we asked them first if they would be willing, and we got very good response rate from that. And then from here on out, we actually just email them and let them unsubscribe. So it's an opt-out rather than an opt-in policy. And to date, we really, it's really been completely fine. I think many libraries are concerned about this, but we have not had any issues. The opt-out works out fine, and as you guys can see, it's not a huge amount of people opt out. They really, quite honestly, want to hear from us. We did do before what I think lots of libraries do is, make them proactively say they wanted to hear from us, and we didn't use that very often. That was mostly used for hold pickups and things like that, not for direct communication about our services.
Mm-hmm. And I do think it depends on kind of your own communication policies, but every library is a little different. And we do have opt-out options on all the communications. It's mandatory that you offer that to customers, so they can opt out on their own if they choose not to receive any further communication.
Okay, great. I think that was our last question. So thank you, everyone, for your participation today. OrangeBoy will be making this presentation available for download here within the next few days, and we'll also follow up with an email with a link provided so that you can download this. If you do have any questions, please feel free to contact us. Our contact information is here on the screen. And thank you all for participating today.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Sara.
Thank you. This was very. I enjoyed it very much, and I hope that people look towards tools like this. They're very useful.
Great. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Mm-hmm.